fantasy football friends. I'm the Raging Redhead Cam Stewart from HotRoster today. Week 9 is nearly wrapped up, meaning we are officially passing into the second half of the NFL season. And what a start it's been. I mean, you've got the Raiders right behind the Pats in the AFC. Dak Prescott has got the boys at 7-1. And what about the defending NFC champs, the Panthers, or should I say Pussycats, sitting at 3-5? Shocking. Either way, with another week barring completion, it's time to highlight this week's winners and losers. The Panthers might be shocking the NFL with their current record, but Melvin Gordon continues to shock the fantasy landscape. I mean, is there honestly a better running back in fantasy right now? For the second time this season, Gordon managed to top 30 fantasy points. His performance on Sunday against the Titans saw him net 261 total yards on 36 touches. That's insane. Even crazier, believe it or not, is the fact that 103 of Gordon's 196 came on the ground after contact. This guy is a beast. He now has 11 touchdowns on the season, which is the most of any player. He also has 167 fantasy points on the season. That's the most of any running back this year. So don't be surprised if you see Gordon on my list of winners again. This guy isn't going anywhere. How a week can change everything. Well, at least it did for Mark Ingram of the Saints. Meanwhile, things were more or less the same for his teammate Tim Hightower. Either way, after scoring negative 1.5 fantasy points last week, the worst total of his career, Mark Ingram managed to do the opposite on Sunday against the Niners as he tacked on 171 total yards and 2 scores, one of them a super 75-yard scamper to the house, the longest of his career. Those totals made Ingram the third highest scoring back of the week and likely secured him the top spot in the committee he seems to be forming with Hightower. And speaking of Timmy Hightower, the 30-year-old himself, he was no slouch. He out-touched Ingram 24-17 and recorded 102 yards total and got a score as well. It led to a 16-point day in fantasy, the 8th best total for any running back, and his performance also allowed him to retain fantasy relevance. So unlike last week, there were no losers in the Saints' backfield. Quite the opposite, really. Both of these guys and their owners won huge in Week 9. Another player over the hill at 30 who had a monster day was the Senator, Jason Witten of the Cowboys. Witten seemed to turn back the clocks with his performance against the Browns in Cleveland. The big man caught 8 of 10 targets for 134 yards and a touchdown. His first 100-yard game receiving since Week 17 of 2013. That's a 44-game stretch where he didn't top the century mark. Just madness. He also scored only his 3rd touchdown in 23 games, which marked his 2nd score in as many weeks. Overall, it was just a banner day for Witten. His 19.4 fantasy points were the most of any tight end in Week 9. He also became the oldest Cowboy to record 100 yards since Terrell Owens did back in 2008. I wouldn't expect this kind of performance again, but for this week, Jason Witten, a huge winner in my books. On the other side of things, it wasn't all good times for the boys in Cleveland. Well, at least not for fantasy owners of Dez Bryant. After the former Oklahoma State Cowboy went off for a $113 and a touchdown last week, the same problems we've seen with Dak's game return this week. Despite the juiciest matchup you could ever ask for, Dez caught 1 of 4 targets for 19 yards. Sure, you could make the argument that he saw plenty of Joe Hayden in Cleveland, but Hayden just isn't the same elite player he once was. With the depth and balance the Cowboys' offense operates under, it's going to be hard for Bryant to become the focal point and dominate on a week-to-week basis. This was a prime example. Owners should be worried moving forward. His performance in Believeland is why I think Dez is the biggest loser in Week 9. No one had more to gain or lose this week than Charkandrick West of the Kansas City Chiefs. With Jamal Charles out for most of it, if not the entire 2016 season, and Spencer Ware missing after a concussion, West had a chance to take control of this backfield. He had a chance to become, quite honestly, a top 15 back for fantasy owners. What did he do instead? Oh yeah, he totaled 74 yards on 16 touches, averaging 3 yards a carry, and if you take away that 25-yard catch and run, he only averaged 3 yards per touch as well. Just brutal. As Spencer Ware comes back from his concussion this week, consider this guy irrelevant in fantasy. He's going to be no more than a handcuff. Charkandrick West lost big time in Week 9. Finally, my third and final loser of the week has been a guy who, quite frankly, has been losing all season long. And that guy's name would be Todd Gurley of the LA Rams. Look, I love Gurley. The former kid from Georgia has boundless potential, but the problem is the Rams' offense stinks. It's brutal. I mean, how do you get by the goal line and not even give Gurley a crack? It's simply ridiculous. All that aside, Case Keenum isn't moving the needle for the Rams. He isn't frightening anybody with the deep ball either. So teams, they load the box up against the Rams, which is why Gurley has been held without a score in 6 of his last 8 games. It's why he totaled only 76 yards on Sunday, including 48 yards on the ground on 12 carries. That marked the 6th time this season he's been held to single-digit fantasy points. And until the Rams can show they're a true threat with the passing game, Gurley's numbers are going to continue to suffer, despite his ability to gain so many after contact. It makes me sad to say this for a kid with so much talent, but Gurley might not be one of this week's biggest losers in Week 9. He could arguably become this season's biggest bust in fantasy football. Well, that's it for my Hot Roster recap of Week 9. And for those of you who don't know what Hot Roster is, hey, I feel bad for you. Go to HotRoster.com and check it out. Download the app, give it a try. It's like no other fantasy game you've ever played. And then for help winning the game, check out Hot Roster today with me and Gary and Thorne every weekday at 4:30 Eastern, only on the Fantasy Sports Network. For Hot Roster now, I'm Cam Stewart, and I'll see you on the virtual gridiron.